Comment down below where you're watching from and don't forget to like and subscribe if you hate Karen. Miles Griffin had barely drifted into the shallow half-sleep familiar to anyone on a graveyard schedule when his bedside handset erupted in a shrill vibrato. A luminous 3 a.m. glared from the digital clock, mocking the few precious hours he reserved for rest before the sun dared to rise. Through a fog of exhaustion, Miles fumbled for the device, expecting nothing more urgent than a wrong number or an automated survey. Instead, the tinny speaker delivered an unmistakable voice, sharp, insistent, and immediately aggravating. "Good morning, Miles. This is Karen from the HOA," the caller announced, her tone lacking even a veneer of courtesy. "I require the front barrier to your property unlatched immediately." Miles sat up, sheets pooling at his waist. The request sounded absurd. No courtesy, no explanation, only a demand issued at an ungodly hour. His neighborhood association possessed a reputation for capricious edicts, but even for the HOA, summoning a resident at 3 a.m. crossed a line. He cleared his throat, forcing calm into his voice. "Karen, I'm not raising that barrier in the middle of the night," he replied evenly. "It's private property, and I need some rest before my next shift. Why do you need access?" Silence stretched on the line for a heartbeat, long enough for Miles to picture Karen's pinched expression framed by perfectly coiffed hair and an ever-present clipboard. When she spoke again, her words dripped with unearned authority. "The reason is not your concern," she snapped. "I must inspect a potential covenant violation inside your frontage, and I won't have time during daylight. Cooperate, or face the consequences outlined in Section 12 of the Community Charter." The phrase, Section 12, made Miles roll his eyes. It was the catch-all clause the HOA invoked whenever they could not cite a genuine infraction. He swung his legs over the side of the mattress, feeling anger replace fatigue. Outside his window, the street lamps carved dull amber circles onto the cul-de-sac, devoid of movement. The idea of permitting anyone, least of all Karen, to wander the grounds under cover of darkness felt both invasive and unsafe. "Look," he said, voice tightening, "if there's a legitimate issue, you can schedule an appointment at a sane hour, and I'll be present. Right now, the barrier stays secured." The line crackled with Karen's quickened breathing. She launched into a litany of threats, administrative penalties, legal proceedings, even a notation in the association's monthly bulletin shaming non-compliant homeowners. Each ultimatum rang hollow to Miles, who had navigated far tougher authority figures during years of supervising a steel plant's overnight crew. Finally, he cut her off. "Submit whatever paperwork you think necessary, but my property remains closed until daylight," he stated, then thumbed the red icon, severing the connection. In the sudden quiet, Miles exhaled slowly, heart hammering. The absurdity of being bullied by the HOA at 3 a.m. felt surreal, yet his refusal filled him with a measured pride. He set the handset back on the nightstand, determined to salvage what remained of his dwindling rest, all the while unaware that the night's disruption had only just begun. Miles Griffin sat motionless on the edge of his mattress, handset pressed to his ear while the red digits on his bedside clock crept toward 3:02 a.m. He had asked the obvious question, why the HOA president needed to breach his front barrier at this hour. Yet Karen answered with nothing but hauteur wrapped in silence. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried an edge that made the late-night quiet feel brittle. "Mr. Griffin, I advise you not to obstruct an official request," she intoned. "Immediate entry is required." Miles pinched the bridge of his nose, forcing his tired mind to focus. He pictured the sleepy cul-de-sac outside, its lamplight puddled on empty asphalt. "Required for what, Karen?" "If there's an emergency, fire, gas, medical. You call first responders, not me." "There are circumstances you don't need to know," she replied. The answer was a deadbolt slammed against transparency. "Unlatch your barrier, return to bed, and the HOA will handle the matter." Miles's gaze drifted to the framed photograph on his dresser, his father in a molten haze of the steel mill, teaching him that rules matter only when applied with sense. Tonight, sense was in short supply. He drew a breath. "You're asking me to surrender my property at 3 a.m. without any justification," he said slowly. "That is unreasonable and unsafe. Present the concern in daylight, with documentation, and I'll cooperate." Karen exhaled a brittle laugh, the sound of someone unaccustomed to being challenged. "Your stance is noted. However, refusal to comply places you in violation of Article 7, subsection C, obstruction of HOA inspection. Non-compliance can incur administrative surcharges. Unlock the barrier." Miles's pulse thudded, not with fear but with incredulity. Administrative surcharges meant $50 slips taped to mailboxes for trash cans left out too long, not surprise dawn raids. Article 7 doesn't supersede common-sense safety. "I'll meet you tomorrow, Karen." "Now good and I, Mr. Griffin," she cut in, her syllables sharpening, "I represent the collective welfare. Your personal fatigue is irrelevant. The HOA's authority ends at my deed line." He didn't raise his voice. He simply rolled steel over it, the same tone he used on reckless forklift drivers at the mill. "Bring paperwork or bring a sheriff, but until then, the barrier stays put." A hush fell. Miles imagined Karen's manicured nails drumming a desktop as she recalibrated. When she spoke again, her words slid through clenched teeth. "Refusal duly recorded. A follow-up action will occur. Remember, cooperation reflects on your frontage status and resale prospects." The implication? That she could tank his property value with a few keystrokes on the HOA newsletter, wasn't lost on him. But fatigue had burned into frustration, frustration forged resolve. "Noted," he said, and thumbed the call to mute rather than end it, giving himself a moment's silence. His bedroom felt smaller now, the night heavier. He could either cave to bureaucratic bullying or uphold his boundary. The choice resurfaced memories of overtime shifts where corners begged to be cut, yet he'd insisted on protocols because safety demanded it. Tonight's protocol was simpler: don't open doors for strangers at 3 in the morning, especially not self-important neighbors with vague agendas. He unmuted. "Karen, I will not provide access. File your notice. Good night." Then he pressed END before her retort could slither through the speaker. The room returned to stillness, punctuated only by the clock's quiet march. Miles lay back, heart drumming against the quiet. He doubted sleep would reclaim him, but at least he'd reclaimed a principle: respect must be mutual, even under the bright banner of an HOA. He closed his eyes, unaware that the next knock on his door would not come from a phone. 2 minutes later the handset vibrated again, its screen flashing the same association hotline. Miles's thumb hovered, tempted to let it ring into the void, but curiosity overrode irritation. He accepted. Karen's voice arrived already at a boil. "Your refusal is on record. Consequently, the HOA Violation Committee will convene tomorrow to discuss sanctions, financial, legal, and reputational." Miles swung his legs off the bed once more. "Threatening me won't change the answer." "I'm not threatening, Mr. Griffin," she countered. "I'm informing. Expect a penalty invoice before noon." He pictured the HOA's pastel-colored notices fluttering across his neighbors' porches, each embossed with the association seal, a double-ringed oak tree suggesting benevolence while sheltering punitive fine print. Invoice for what? Exercising common sense. "For obstructing inspection and for improper garden maintenance," she snapped. "Your eastern flower bed shows irregular edging, non-harmonious with community standards." Miles barked a tired laugh. The flower bed in question was a row of irises his late mother planted, its edges curved gently, refusing the HOA's preferred 90-degree exactitude. "So now my irises are an emergency." "They're symptomatic of defiance," Karen declared. "Visual disorder spreads when neighbors disregard guidelines." He imagined her clutching that clipboard like a holy text, scanning yards for apostasy. "Listen," he said, softening his tone to something close to compassion. "It's night. Whatever you think you saw can wait. There is a van parked near your hedge," she hissed. "I suspect unlicensed contractors storing materials. I must inspect." The admission spilled out, finally, yet even that smelled off. Miles owned no van and had arranged no repairs. "So you don't know what's happening," he answered. "You're guessing and willing to invade property at 3 a.m. to validate a hunch. A hunch informed by 2 decades of community stewardship," she shot back. "Open the barrier or the committee escalates to municipal code enforcement." The room felt smaller than ever, closing in like the hot shell of a blast furnace. Miles shifted his grip on the handset, wrestling the urge to rant. Decades in industry had taught him to distill frustration into clarity. "Here's what will happen," he said. "At 8 a.m., I'll email the committee requesting any concerns in writing. I will engage once I return from my shift. If municipal authorities wish an inspection, they can schedule and I will be present. Until then, the barrier stays." Silence, then Karen abandoned pretense. "People like you undermine neighborhood harmony," she seethed. "You think your swing shift excuse is neglect? Your lawn is mottled, your shutters need repainting, and your porch light is too bright." Miles cut her off. "Enough. I've recorded this call." He hadn't, but the bluff stiffened his spine. "Any further harassment goes to the sheriff's office." A hiss, like steam venting from a cracked pipe, preceded the final salvo. "Prepare for consequences." The line went dead. Miles set the handset down, fingertips buzzing. He paced the room, glimpsing the sleepy street through his blinds. No van. No crisis. Only stillness. He pulled on sweatpants, double-checked the lock on his front barrier via the smart home app, and sat at the kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm coffee, mind racing. Karen's fixation on control felt less like stewardship and more like mania. Yet underneath the irritation, a chill ran. Had she truly seen a van? Was someone else skulking nearby? He toggled his door camera feed, empty driveway. Still, he couldn't shake the sense that events were sliding beyond petty HOA theatrics. At 3:26, he powered down the phone and headed back to bed, hoping exhaustion would drown adrenaline. He managed 5 shallow breaths before the doorbell rang. 3 piercing chimes that made his heart ricochet off ribcage. The night had found a new tactic, and Miles sensed it wore a different face than Karen's. Miles stalked to the foyer, every footstep deliberate. Through the frosted glass of the door he saw a broad silhouette rocking impatiently on its heels. The porch lamp cast an amber halo around a man in a windbreaker, fists jammed into pockets. Not a police officer's posture, there was too much restless weight in the shoulders. Miles cracked the door, security chain engaged. "Can I help you?" The stranger leaned into the gap, breath laced with spearmint and bravado. "Name's Grant Sloan. Karen's husband." He tapped the doorframe twice, a boxer's rhythm. "We need a chat." "Outside." Even in dim light, Miles recognized the breed, high school quarterback gone to seed, still trading on old intimidation tricks. "Whatever the HOA requires can wait until morning," Miles replied. "Good night." He began to close the door. A palm the size of a shovel smacked the wood. "Hold on. I'm trying to be neighborly here. Karen's upset, can't sleep. You gonna fix that, or do I?" Miles measured the man, 6+ feet, thick-necked, but his stance betrayed a slight sway, maybe alcohol or adrenaline. "I'm not opening the barrier," Miles said. "Take it up with the committee." Grant chuckled, tapping his temple. "You think paperwork solves everything? How about we take a walk to the gate and you put in a code like a gentleman?" "No," Miles's voice was asphalt flat. Grant's smile soured. "Buddy, you're making this harder than it has to be." Miles felt heat climb his spine. He loosened his stance, recalling the boxing gym his father had dragged him to as a teen, elbows tucked, weight balanced. "Step off my property, Grant." Instead, Grant wedged a boot into the doorway, stretching the chain. The gesture yanked Miles across a threshold of patience. "Last warning," Miles said, tone low. From behind Grant came Karen's voice, shrill and cracking in the cold air. "Handle it, Grant. We have bylaws to enforce." Grant smirked. "See? The lady's spoken." He shoved, snapping the chain with a tinny plink. The foyer seemed to tilt. Miles's pulse slowed, every beat a metronome. He stepped back, giving ground deliberately until both men faced each other in the entryway's narrow corridor. Grant lunged, aiming to grab the collar of Miles's t-shirt. Years of football drills flashed in muscle memory. Miles rotated, deflecting the grab, then planted a shoulder into Grant's ribs, channeling leverage. Grant wheezed, staggered, yet swung a looping right. Miles slipped inside the arc, clasped Grant's wrist, and pivoted into a textbook hip throw, dumping the larger man onto the ceramic tiles. The house shook with the impact. Grant cursed, wind knocked from lungs. Miles dropped a knee between Grant's shoulders, pinning him, forearm braced against the back of the neck, secure enough to hold but not injure. Over Grant's sputtering he heard Karen shriek outside, the sound of authority collapsing into panic. "Don't move," Miles ordered. Grant tried to buck, pressure increased. "I said don't." Miles's phone buzzed on an end table, neighbor Linda across the street, texting everything okay. I heard shouting. He ignored it, focusing on the man beneath him. Grant's breaths whistled, the earlier confidence had leaked out like air from a punctured ball. "Get off, we were just talking." "Breaking and entering isn't conversation," Miles said. He craned his neck toward the open doorway. Karen stood a few feet back, cell phone in hand, floodlit by the porch lamp, her expression oscillating between fury and fear. "You assaulted him," she screamed. "He breached my door." "I defended myself," Miles replied, voice level. Blue strobing light painted the street, squad car arriving faster than Miles expected. Perhaps Linda had dialed 911. Footsteps pounded up the walkway. Time slowed again, but this time Miles ceded control willingly. Official eyes could sort the chaos now brewing on his threshold. Officer Mia Vega reached the doorway first, partner Leon Chen close behind. "Hands where I can see them," she barked. Miles complied, raising his free hand while keeping the other braced against Grant's shoulder blade. Grant attempted a groan that sounded like protest. "Suspect subdued," Miles said evenly. "He forced entry and assaulted me." Officer Chen cuffed Grant with practiced efficiency. Grant's protest slurred into a tirade about "just talking" and HOA business, but the officers listened with cool detachment. Vega turned to Miles, noting the broken chain dangling from the jamb. "Did he damage the door?" "Yes, and he ignored several warnings," Miles answered. He recounted the sequence in clipped, shift supervisor cadence: phone call, threats, forced entry, physical confrontation. Outside, Karen paced the walkway, flashlight app trained theatrically on her clipboard. "Officers, my husband is performing a community compliance check." Officer Vega raised a hand. "Ma'am, step back." Her professional calm sliced through Karen's rhetoric. "We'll speak with you after we secure the scene." Grant, now seated on the porch steps in cuffs, hurled a sideways glare at his wife. "They're pinning assault on me." "Because you assaulted me," Miles countered, arms folded. Officer Chen collected photographs of the broken chain, tile scuffs, and Grant's torn windbreaker. Standard evidence, yet each shutter click felt to Miles like a nail closing a lid on the night's absurdity. When Vega finally turned to Karen, the HOA president launched into a rehearsed monologue about vans, illicit materials, and Miles's aggressive refusal. Vega asked a single question: did you witness the assault? Karen faltered. She had been on the lawn. Officer Chen checked Grant's license, then scanned dispatch. No prior criminal record, just a speeding ticket. Chen read the charge aloud, assault and trespassing. Grant's shoulders sagged, bravado dripping away. Karen advanced, voice rising. You can't arrest him. The HOA grants us implied access under covenant. Vega's brows knit. An HOA covenant does not override criminal law. If you wish to contest, file through the court. Right now, your husband goes downtown for processing. Karen's outrage pitched higher. I'll have your badges for this. The board will. Chen handed her a citation instead, disturbing the peace, 3:05 a.m. The sheet fluttered in her trembling grip like a white flag she refused to wave. Miles exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd trapped. The strobing light ceased as backup cleared, dawn hovered at the horizon, smearing gray across the sky. Vega took Miles's statement one more time, voice gentler now that adrenaline had ebbed. Will you press charges? Yes, Miles said. The word tasted cold but necessary. As the squad car pulled away with Grant in the back seat, Karen remained on the grass, clipboard dangling, muttering about bylaws. Officers departed soon after, leaving the cul-de-sac shivering in pre-dawn quiet. Miles resecured the wrecked chain with a temporary bolt, then leaned against the closed door, eyes burning. The incident replayed in fragments, the phone's shrill ring, the shattered chain, Grant's surprised wheeze. He rubbed his temples. Tonight's battle line had been clear. Privacy versus control. Control lost. Yet unease lingered. Karen's obsession bordered on irrational, but obsession often had roots, fear, rumor, something. What had she expected to find through that barrier? The question echoed without answer as first light seeped under the blinds. The following afternoon, after a 10-hour shift supervising welding bays, Miles returned home to find a sealed envelope wedged in his doorframe, issued by the HOA compliance office. He half expected a fresh threat, but the document merely acknowledged ongoing investigation and requested he submit a written statement within 72 hours. No fine attached, yet. Inside, the house smelled of coffee gone stale. Miles collapsed onto the couch, boots still on, and let the muted television fill the silence. Local news scrolled a ticker about a community meeting concerning overnight disturbances. He muted it again, uneasy that neighborhood gossip would warp the story. At dusk a knock sounded, gentler than Grant's sledgehammer approach. Opening the door, Miles found Officer Vega out of uniform, holding a slim folder. Mr. Griffin, I'm off duty, she said. Mind if we talk? He stepped aside, curiosity outweighing fatigue. Vega sat at the breakfast bar, flipping open the folder. Grant Sloan made bail. His attorney's arguing self-defense, says you provoked him. Miles arched an eyebrow. In my own foyer? Exactly. We have your statement and 911 audio, so the case is strong, but his lawyer wants to negotiate a plea, drop trespass if you accept apology and restitution. Miles folded arms. I'm not after money. I want accountability. Vega nodded. Understood. The DA thinks a guilty plea on misdemeanor assault is likely. Your call. He rubbed tired eyes. I'll consider. But there's something else. Karen claimed a mysterious van. You find any record of that? Vega produced 2 photographs. A blurry white panel van captured by a neighbor's door camera at 2:55 a.m., idling near Miles's hedge for 40 seconds before rolling on. No plates visible. We're checking traffic cams, Vega said. Could be nothing, could be hauling tools for a remodel down the block, but the timing is odd. A chill rippled over Miles's shoulders. So Karen wasn't completely inventing it. Maybe. Her methods were wrong, but she did see something. Unfortunately, obsession can twist intent. They talked 20 minutes, Vega promising updates. As she left, she paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, community associations usually mellow when presidents rotate. Elections next week. Miles managed a wry laugh. Can't come soon enough. After the door closed, he stared at the folder photo, white van in grainy streetlight, until the image blurred. The night's chaos wasn't simply HOA power tripping, there might have been an external spark, however faint. Yet his fatigue drowned speculation. He typed the requested statement, attached phone logs, and emailed the HOA with a cordial note. 3 days passed. Grant's attorney offered twice more to settle, Miles declined. He changed the chain and installed a reinforced latch. He worked nights, slept days, and ignored the burn of porch-side whispers. On the 4th evening, a certified letter arrived from the HOA. Complaint against Karen for conduct unbecoming the presidency, filed by multiple residents citing her 3 a.m. antics. A hearing was set immediately, and the envelope's carbon copy named Miles as a relevant witness, participation optional. He felt vindication sprout like grass after rain, modest yet alive. Still, the white van's ghost lingered at the edge of thought, reminding him that motives, like shadows, stretch and shift with the light. The hearing convened in the clubhouse. A faux colonial building where bake sales and blood drives normally reigned. Tonight, folding chairs formed a cautious semicircle around a dais. Karen sat alone at the end of the front row, lips drawn so tight they seemed to press syllables back into her throat. Grant was absent, court order barred him from HOA property until trial. Miles chose a seat near the rear. He wasn't required to testify, but curiosity, and a flicker of concern about that van, brought him. The acting chair, Marisol Quinn, called the meeting to order. She introduced the agenda. Item 1, alleged misconduct of President Karen regarding unauthorized 3 a.m. enforcement. Witnesses spoke. Linda described waking to screams, fearing domestic violence. An elderly couple recounted Karen prowling yards with a phone light. Each testimony chiseled away at the myth of benevolent oversight. When Miles's turn came, he relayed events calmly: phone calls, threats, forced entry, arrest. He mentioned the mysterious van, careful not to assign motive. Karen's gaze stayed fixed on her clipboard, as though she could edit reality if she didn't look up. After statements, the board excused witnesses to deliberate. Residents buzzed in clusters. Miles hovered near the refreshment table. Marisol returned 10 minutes later to announce the verdict. Karen was censured and removed from office effective immediately pending a special election. Gasps rippled. Someone clapped before being shushed. Karen rose, clipboard held like a shield. She opened her mouth, shut it, then marched out without a word. The door's soft thud felt anticlimactic after weeks of tension. Outside, dusk painted the parking lot lavender. Miles found Karen facing the ornamental fountain, shoulders shaking, not with rage, but something sadder. Against instinct, he approached. She spoke first, voice raw. "I tried to protect the neighborhood." "From what?" he asked. "The van," she whispered. "Last week someone stole tools from 2 garages. The board ignored me. When I saw headlights near your hedge," her eyes brimmed, frustration mixing with guilt. "I panicked. Thought catching them red-handed would prove my worth." Miles leaned on the fountain's edge. "You could have knocked during daylight. I'd have reviewed my cameras." "I know," she said, almost inaudible. "I let fear turn into control." For a moment, the absurd night shrank into something recognizably human, anxiety mischanneled into authoritarian zeal. It didn't excuse the break-in, but it explained the spiral. "I'm still pressing charges against Grant," Miles said gently. "But I hope you'll focus on yourself. Maybe without the title, life will breathe easier." She managed a brittle nod. As Miles walked away, porch lights winked on across the cul-de-sac like reassurances. He felt lighter, not from victory over an antagonist, but from peeling back the mask to find messy humanity underneath. Answers rarely erased consequences, yet they eased the mind. 1 week later, a cream-colored envelope bearing the HOA seal arrived, this time signed by Evelyn Moore, newly elected president. The letter began with a formal apology. On behalf of the association, I regret the distress caused by recent events. Paragraph 2 addressed landscaping rules. Gone were prescriptive diagrams dictating inch-perfect edging. In their place, a pledge to adopt inclusive guidelines celebrating individual expression so long as safety and basic maintenance are upheld. Miles chuckled, his irises had survived the Inquisition. The third paragraph invited residents to a Saturday listening garden stroll, encouraging neighbors to share horticultural tips over lemonade rather than citations. The tone felt less edict, more embrace. Miles taped the letter inside his pantry door, visible proof that a community could self-correct. He sent a brief reply thanking President Moore and expressing willingness to volunteer for the neighborhood watch, now structured cooperatively with local police rather than midnight vigilantes. That Saturday, sunlight pooled across lawns as residents meandered, trading cuttings and stories. Miles found himself laughing with Linda over the curious resilience of HOA politics. Children chalked hopscotch grids on sidewalks Grant once stalked like a sentry. Karen did not appear, but rumor held she'd accepted counseling and intended to run a small craft plant stand at the weekend market. Transformation, Miles mused, often starts at rock bottom, sometimes paved by censure notices. As afternoon waned, Evelyn Moore paused beside Miles's irises. "Your mother's flowers." He nodded. "They're lovely," she said simply, and moved on. No clipboard, no tape measure. Just appreciation. Miles felt tension he hadn't known lingered dissolve into the warm air. Later that evening Miles reclined on his porch swing, twilight brushing the sky a smoky rose. Wind chimes clinked, soft, orderly music against memories of clattering chaos. He sipped mint tea and watched solar lamps blink awake along the walkway he defended with muscle and principle. He thought of Grant, whose court date loomed, of Karen, unmoored yet perhaps finding gentler ground. Of Officer Vega's calm firmness, of his own surprise at standing firm without slipping into aggression. Each thread wove into a fuller picture. Community was neither benign nor malignant, it mirrored the intentions poured into it. Miles opened the HOA's new digital portal on his tablet. The landing page showcased upcoming events. Tool marking clinic with local police, compost exchange weekends, a night shift neighbors, forum acknowledging residents like him whose lives tilted opposite the 9-to-5 sun. Small signals, yet they said, "We learned." He closed the app and gazed at the rebuilt front barrier, now fortified but painted a welcoming sage green. Boundaries, he realized, needn't be brutal, they could be clear and still inviting, like a sentence with proper punctuation. A final gust rustled the irises. Miles smiled, thinking of his mother's quiet insistence that flowers listen better than people. Perhaps the blooms had absorbed the night's acrimony and transmuted it into petals. Under the first stars, Miles allowed himself a rare indulgence, satisfaction. Not triumph over an enemy, just the steady glow that follows alignment between principle and outcome. He had faced an absurd hour, upheld reason, and watched common sense reassert itself like dawn after blackout. In the ledger of life, that felt like a credit well earned.